You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos Stilianessis.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 28 of Here for the Truth. Such a pleasure to be here with you all. Appreciate you all tuning in. As always, the first half of this episode will be available to the public and the second half to our members on Patreon. And today we have two incredible gentlemen joining us to have this discussion. We have, firstly, I'll introduce them one by one. We've got Chad Kilgore. Chad came from a sports background. He played football most of his life, including a short stint in the NFL and a year in the Canadian Football League. Chad is now a full-time self-taught artist. Weird transition, he says. He's got a wife, 3 little ones, and now he lives just outside Kansas City. In addition, and probably most importantly, he's committed to finding the truth of our reality and helping others to align themselves with it. And Chad is actually an incredible artist. For those watching the visual component of this, you can see some of his work behind him. Amazing stuff, man. And we got Remy Vega with us. Remy was born in Southern California, spending most of his life in his hometown of Victorville in the high desert. Remy was alerted to the hidden history of the world by his mother, who was born and raised in El Roble, Mexico. Upon moving to the US, his mother was adopted by a Methodist pastor who also had ties with Freemasonry. Remy's grandfather was an early influence in his interest in studying history, language, and spirituality. Remy's paternal grandmother, Jean, was a church pianist and organist, leading to an early interest in music. At age 14, he was shown a documentary on the events of September 11th that forever changed his perspective. This started Remy on the journey to truly understand the history of the world. During this time in middle school, Remy became equally interested in hip-hop and audio production, and eventually spent time in college studying religion with a minor in music. He's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he dedicates his time to music, research, archiving, information, and writing. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Here for the Truth.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Now,
All right.
both these gentlemen know each other, and they've got a keen shared interest in natural law, and I'm keen to just have this conversation and share this with you both. Chad, let's start with you, man. What were some of your key major rites of passages in making that transition from obviously growing up in professional sports, then obviously realizing that something's wrong? There's something I need to figure out here. Right. What was the catalyst for that?
Well, if I'm being honest, it took me a long time to figure it out. But yeah, I got out of like professional sports, like that fire just burnt out. And then I knew I didn't want to go do any like real life jobs, like any kind of corporate thing like that. So My parents are antique dealers, and they kind of travel around and do different shows and stuff. And so I did that with them for a while. And then I just started making my own stuff and establishing a client base. And, people just liked my art better than the things I was selling. So, I knew kind of intuitively that the system we had was weird, and I didn't align with it, as far as like the debt-based slavery system, and so that's something I figured out early. But then, like, you always hear like 9/11's an inside job, and I was like, yeah, I probably was, knowing how corrupt our government is. But I never put together like just how deep it goes, as far as like there being like a dark occult elite class that really pulls the strings. And to be honest, man, it wasn't until like the start of this shit that I woke up. Like, you know what I mean? I just got plugged in at the beginning of this scam. Like, whenever I saw people in cars to get tests, I was like, man, this is bizarre. You know what I mean? It's like so out of alignment with nature and everything natural. And I think it was just, it honestly, it's like a trauma thing. Like, it takes trauma for some people to wake up. And I think this was probably my trauma. And then once I figured out that there was a scam, I'm like, I have an addictive personality kind of thing. It's like once I'm onto something, like I'm going 110. So that's where I've been since,
Nah, I hear you, bro. I mean, that's incredible that your key awakenings just happened through this process. And I mean, you've already obviously worked through so much, dude. So kudos to you, 100%.
And and the thing is, it's like a lot of people like this whole fucking whatever you want to call it scam has been the eye opener. Yeah. So it's really cool to hear that. I've been having conversations with a lot of people, and the same thing is like, yeah, last year was like the thing. I was kind of aware of some things going on, but what the fuck?
Yeah. It's like I better get my shit in order real quick, It's like we're so far out of alignment with nature and reality that, I figured out that just how far we were and how much work I had to do to get back to nature and, godly things.
Absolutely, man. And I mean, what about Remy thrown in the deep end from the beginning? got ties to Freemasonry. He's watching Loose Change in year 8.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, man. Like, what was your perspective as a 14-year-old catching onto this?
So I think that a lot of it, there was already sort of like some groundwork that had been laid just because of, I think that, my mom is from Mexico and she was adopted. And then like, that little part of the bio, I already heard that. And so she kind of, I think, maintained a sort of skepticism and was like a pretty analytical person. So she had put me on to like, the concept of Freemasons being involved like heavily with society and the establishment of society. So I was already kind of like, oh yeah, there's these like people that kind of just are just like running the game, whatever. And so then in 2001, when the whole situation happened, I was like already like not really convinced. I showed up. I can. It's like, of course, everybody remembers these things so vividly. I walked into my class, and then my teacher's given the whole speech about, oh yeah, we think it was this person, and I was like, well, if they knew who it was already, then why didn't why wasn't it couldn't it have been stopped? And so I got a little bit. I raised my hand and asked that question, and kind of got reprimanded a little bit. So it was just like something's not right. I think that growing up also like with like a church background, I think I was kind of always like afraid of the end of times. Like eschatology was just like such a thing for me. So I was always like, oh, the end of the world. So, but like once I saw Loose Change, I was just like, okay, all right, this sort of makes sense. Like I can see how the story that's being told doesn't really add up at all. And it's just, I've always, my mom really had a huge a part in encouraging me to think for myself. When I was younger, she was always just like, don't, you always think for yourself. You don't tell somebody to what you need to believe. And like, even though like my family was like church, like both sides on my mom and my dad's side were Methodist pastors, but my mom wasn't really religious. So she kind of like encouraged us to like ask questions. But then I started watching like Jordan Maxwell videos around the same time. Like it was like when the internet was like fresh with like being able to find videos. Like it was like pre-YouTube, I think too. But it was like finding like these videos on probably like Google video of some type. I don't know. And so I started seeing like the symbolism stuff being broken down. And that was probably only within like a year of seeing that Loose Change video. So I was like, okay, like, and I was really big into like mythology growing up. Like my mom got me like a book of just Greek and Egyptian mythology, like all the different, characters, gods, goddesses, and all that. And so for me, understanding like that there's like a symbolic nature to things, and like understanding that these archetypes represent something, being able to like interpret that in like the average, everyday, business and government, building, or the clothing that's being worn, all of this stuff. I was just like, okay, it all really kind of hit me and made sense pretty early on. And it's been just a matter of like contextualizing and like furthering my understanding of, I guess, the mechanisms of that and what that means and what, how to deal with it. I guess it's been a long time, and it was a lot. So I was very anxious about this for like 5-10 years. And then, yeah. And I mean, that was just the beginning, because then there was like the whole, there was like the whole like the 2010 is, so I almost converted to Orthodox Judaism. I got really into that. So I was studying like, ancient mythology and ancient languages like Hebrew and Greek and stuff like that. And my my grandfather on that adopted my mom when she moved to the US, he gave me like books on like the Mayan language, and he like gave me a copy of the Quran. And so that was, at the end of high school going into college. And then I started studying even more so about like the occult nature of things even further, because to me it was just all Freemasonry. And then I started to realize, oh, it's like a lot more.
No,
So
definitely a lot
yeah.
more, bro. And I mean, you said it best. It's the symbology that they weaponize against us, right? And it's only when we don't know what the symbology is. It's so
Yeah.
easy to just assume everything occult is evil and bad, right? But I
Mhm.
think the way we empower ourselves is by understanding the symbology for ourselves. They're weaponizing it against us. Why wouldn't we look into what that pertains?
There's one of my favorite quotes is by Manly P. Hall, and it's when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of man. And I think that's why it's so deep. Some of these esoteric thinkers and researchers, um, you bring up Jordan Maxwell, there's guys like Michael Dazarian and other people of that nature that like this has been part of their work. They've been exploring this nature and really looking at symbology in depth, and how these different organizations, these different groups, that come from ancient sects, how they utilize symbols to lay their claim on the planet, to influence humanity. So it's really fascinating. It's cool that you got into it at a young age.
Yeah. And linguistics was the other huge part of that too. And it like tied hand in hand, because I'm like understanding the symbol and then understanding where it came from, and then understanding how the word like how a lot of words have like morphed into like common usage that come from the same kind of like bedrock of like symbolic language. So yeah, it's it just it's like a Russian nesting doll.
Yeah, definitely, man. I want to ask you this, like looking back now and knowing what you know regarding specifically 9/11, right? How do you perceive that? Would you see it as a mass trauma inflicting event? Do you see that as the primary purpose of all that? Or what's your perspective on 9/11 looking back now?
Me or
Yeah, go
personally?
for it.
So uh I think that it was like kind of a multi-layered I guess a trauma event, and then also enacting a certain ritual numerologically, and then also just like you know uh the actual like image of what was being represented, like the breaking down of the two pillars and sort of like restructuring. There's
Yep.
so much in it, and especially the numerology. And I think that the trauma is part of that aspect of ritual that's done by these dark occult priests. It was definitely like I think a trauma ritual that was kind of fortified by symbols that we had already been kind of exposed to for a long time. And then it really strengthened the image within the overall like collective consciousness. And it's yeah, like I think that the trauma was sort of how they got it to how they created sort of the bind that was really put into place at the time. And I
Yeah.
think it was, and I think that there's a lot of times when that happens, but I think that was a pivotal one. It was like ready for the new era, and it's right after the new millennium started. And yeah, I definitely think that trauma aspect of it was kind of integral to the entire, trajectory.
Mm. And I mean, it's crazy how much like we see it all the time, but how much predictive programming was put in place around 9/11 after the event happened. Now looking back and you see all the different cartoons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like
Oh yeah.
how much they primed our subconscious on so many levels for that trigger event to change absolutely everything.
Hmm.
Have any of you seen it was on YouTube, it was the how Back to the Future predicted 9/11? Have you ever seen that video?
Not that one. No.
Dude, check
I don't
this out.
think I have either.
If I get a chance, I'm gonna find and email it to both of you. It's fucking trippy as hell, dude.
Yeah,
Anyways, I thought I'd throw that
dude.
out.
Yeah.
Are you gonna break that down?
No, I'm not gonna break it down.
Yeah.
I've seen it like 2 times and like years ago. So when we were talking about predictive programming and how our subconsciouses are primed, that just popped in my head. So I figured I'd ask if either of you've seen it.
Yeah. And that's
More
and I think
research to be done, I guess,
Yeah.
on that.
and this is the key thing which in my view people need to get their head around, right? Is that this war, it primarily is psychological, right? That's what the target of all of this is. Because
Absolutely.
as you guys know, right, nature goes on, life goes on. The systems of nature are unchanged by everything we're experiencing. This is like an overlay, which is simply maintained by us buying into it psychologically, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, that's because, nature is going to win out at some point and the truth will come out, but it's like they just keep layering, asphalt over the truth. And whenever the truth starts sprouting up in the cracks, they just try and relayer it over and over again. And eventually, it'll break down. At some point, it'll reach critical mass and the whole thing will fall apart. But it's like, I think how long until that happens is largely up to us because, we have free will. And, people like us that know, I think, have a moral obligation to speak up and act, rather than just hoping somebody's going to come save us.
Yeah.
So what was it for both of you, Chad? I guess we'll segue just from what you just said. What was it that made you be like, hey, listen, I'm gonna step up, and like you had a piece of or a couple red pills in the beginning of 2020, and you're like, I'm not just gonna sit here and make art and live my life and be a good father and be a family man, but I'm also just going to, share information in the way that I do to help plant seeds of growth.
Well, I went through like all of Mark Passio's work. I went through like he has like 240 podcasts or
A
something
lot of
like
hours,
that.
bro.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of hours. Yeah. And I take notes the whole time. And by the end of that, basically, if you don't have the will to become a teacher yourself, then you haven't got the message and you've wasted your time. You know what I mean? And by the end of that, I had a solid foundation to stand on to then go back out and teach this stuff to others, at least from a fundamental perspective. And so that was my trigger, to actually put my face in front of the camera and speak the truth. And I now have 3 children, and it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to leave them a world that's pure slavery? Like, no, I'll sacrifice, if it comes to that, I'll sacrifice myself so we might have a better future for our children and, and your kids and, everybody, the humanity as a whole, so I just can't know these things and not act, to know and not to act is to not know at all. So.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I hear you there, man. Like personally speaking, like I spent a lot of years like hoarding knowledge and information, and then it was like, when is the right time to step more into my power and stop being a little punk and actually like put myself out there, as opposed to like, what are people gonna think? I might lose some friends. Oh, I'm gonna like post something on Facebook. I can think back in the days, and then one person says something mean to me, and it's like, ooh, let me just go hide back into my cave
Dude,
now because
but that
someone.
shit's real, it's like,
I get it. And
Yeah.
you have to like, as an individual, you have to dance with that. You have to come to grips with it. And the more you do it, it's like you build the resilience, you build the confidence, you build the
Absolutely.
strength.
Yeah.
Like the first time I posted something about, injections, was like a while ago. And I remember someone coming on being like, "You're a baby killer," and I was like, I think I like went in my room and cried for like 7 hours. You know what I mean? And it's just like, and then in the early days too, it was just like, I have to get into arguments and spend 18 hours on Facebook having back and forth dialogues with people because they have to know what I'm thinking. And it's like, I couldn't be farther from that now. It's just like, I'm much more grounded and centered, and I do what I do, and I say what I say, and I live my life, and I don't get all jacked up because someone disagrees with me.
But also, like, I'm sorry, go ahead, Remy.
Go for it, bro.
No, yeah, I was gonna say that was a huge thing for me to get through, because I had been involved in music for so long, and there's so much reputation riding around, like as a musician, like, and that kind of like desire for celebrity, approval or whatever that is, and this is something I was thinking about today, and I'm like, it's weird because it's like, as a public figure, you like represent something, but it's always so vague, and so I was always just like, it's whatever, you know, political thing you're supposed to do at the time. So I was always just kind of dancing around it. And like I would like say things little by little here and there. And but it was just because I was so terrified of people being like it would take away from my plays, or it might get me like kicked off of gigs or whatever, you know. So I was just like that was definitely like a big, yeah, that whole internal struggle that really like feeds the stagnancy. It's not good for yourself. It's not really good for anybody either, really. So it's like
And
that's definitely a struggle.
and it's real, and it's part of this hero's journey. It's not like you go from like being afraid to say anything and then all of a sudden there's no, like, you just flip 100% to the other side. I mean, you I guess maybe some people do, but you still have to have that inner struggle between these different like contradicting parts of you that want you to behave in a certain way. You know,
Oh yeah.
hey, let's stay under the radar. It might impact your relationships, it might impact your
Mhm.
career, etc. And then the other part of you is like, fuck that shit. Like, I want to live a heroic life. I want to stand up for truth. I want to speak my mind, and I think that's something that we have to grapple with. And especially as men, that's a whole nother thing. Like, what does it mean to like live the heroically masculine life, when we're involved with the culture that's trying to like destroy masculinity, to like overly feminize everything, and have you not stand up, and to poison you on many different levels, psychologically, spiritually, physically. And so it's like, the reason a lot of this has been allowed to happen is because of what has been occurring, what they've been doing to the masculine, this war on masculinity, because fucking lions would not stand for this shit. It would end. And then you can
Yeah.
go into historically and talk about all these wars, all these wars like that they've sent, all these like hardcore alpha men that have been going out there wanting to fight, defend their country, just die, 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 die. And even sports on another level. It's like you have these badass strong men and they're like fighting for things that, like, listen, I value sports. I was an athlete growing up. I like watching sports on occasion, but at the same time, there was a great quote by Jason Christoff recently that he shared where it's like these badass, physically gifted, strong men are fighting for things and putting their energy towards things that don't really fucking matter in the grand scheme of things, while their country gets overtaken by tyrannous bastards.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a fight for like this like abstract honor.
Yeah.
So I'm curious
Dude.
your thoughts on that, Chad. Like, being a former athlete, I'm not.
I actually shared that same post, and
Oh,
I've
you
got
shared Jason Christoph's post?
yeah.
And it's
I've
crazy. He
got-
had like, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, so I love Cam Wake, bro. And he had Cam Wake up there. I was like, yo, man, it's all good.
yeah. No, man. It's the modern day bread and circuses, it's to keep the masses busy. And then, yeah, I totally agree that, see, these are some of the strongest, as far as physical, strongest men that we've got in society, and we've got them chasing a ball around, and then they're tied to that paycheck.
Yep.
So they feel like if they speak, then, they're going to be looked down upon, or, maybe my paycheck will be cut off. And this is like, you can be in retirement and you're still getting that pension. So, what happens if you step out of line, they're just married to that money. Because largely, man, I think a huge problem is, one of the switches that flipped for me was like, I value truth more now. Truth is on the top of the totem pole for me. So, if societal factors, don't like it, then, it's like, I don't really care, because I value the truth. Because truth, if we align ourselves with truth, we get freedom and peace, and, a more peaceful society. And if we don't, like we do now, we get exactly what we're seeing, just pure chaos and moral relativism and all kinds of ugly shit.
Yeah.
And if you oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I was going to say it's not just the money, it's the power of the herd that they've weaponized as well. And this is the reason why primarily so many people are afraid of speaking out, right? Because they're stuck within this collective grip. But the more you do speak out, what people don't realize that you can actually disentangle yourself, right? Because it's just like this web that we're stuck within. But the more we get our machete out and start fucking saying the shit that actually matters, the more we can actually pull ourselves out, right? Same analogy as the crabs on the bottom of the crab bucket. You begin to actually climb your way out, and you get psychological freedom from the herd as well, and you get the ability to actually be like, wow, I'm an individual and I can say what I want, and I no longer have this weight or this burden of worrying about who the hell is going to dictate to me, right? And to me, it's so liberating.
Yeah, and also like the connections that are made. The four of us would not be here having this conversation if we were just like hiding in our closets, being like, I mean, I would like to say something, but I don't know. I don't know if I do say that, then someone's gonna be upset with me, you know? So it's like when you stand in your truth, you know, let's say just use the analogy of like be the lion in your life in some regard, okay? I'm not saying I'm the fucking lion in every single area of my life, you know?
Show us your hat, bro.
What'd you say?
Show us your hat.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? But it's like we do the best we can. And then when you do, you connect with kindred spirits and like-minded people where you can grow together and get deeper and just keep going on that heroic journey. Anyways, you were gonna say something before, Remy. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no, actually, Joel actually kind of said it's pretty much along the lines of what I was going to say, because Chad was saying basically, you know, like he values, you value truth, then that matters more than what this person or that person says, you know, like basically, you know, like fleeting opinions and I think the point that I was just kind of add in was that like if you find it within yourself to recognize that there is a truth regarding like any grand scale truth or there's a specific thing that you're dealing with, a certain claim that you're trying to assess as being, is this actually as what it's being presented as, or is it not? If you recognize, oh well, this isn't actually what I'm being told it is, and then you also deny yourself that ability to speak in you know in harmony with that which you understand about that you're assessing, then you really weaken yourself. So to be able to like recognize that and then act in accordance with that, that's a way of developing your strength and using your actual willpower, you know? So it's like it
Strengthens character.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I do think that like this concept of like really emasculating people it really is it's something that it is pretty prominent. And I mean, I didn't grow up playing sports, but I grew up in a pretty rough area. So, you know, like learning how to fight my way through things was you know, a key part of my upbringing. And having been taught that by people who were really just they didn't take shit. You know, they didn't take shit, and they didn't take people you know, stepping on them. I was taught respect by a lot of these people. I was taught self-respect and you know a certain limit of you know what is just, you know, like you don't, there's a certain level of degrading that you don't do, but there is also like a way that you learn how to kind of stand up for yourself, but also operate in a certain level of you know, mutual respect. That, I mean, some people don't take it from that. I learned that, but I think that this world that we're kind of cultivating is really just it's breeding this sort of like a weakness, and that herd mentality is I think is both a result of, and also it's kind of like a vicious cycle that causes that, like that you shut yourself up, you shut yourself off, and you just like weaken your resolve, and you weaken your conviction. I think that
and it's like it's super easy to blame the abuser in all circumstances, right? But what part in us have we not recognized to allow ourselves to be abused, you know? And I feel like that's where the gaze needs to turn, because we're only able to be taken advantage of because of the internal compromises that we have within ourselves. If there wasn't prey, there would be no predator. And there's only prey because we have these blind spots that exist. And that's literally how they pull the strings, you know? So, obviously the inner work is first and foremost in taking away the bait, so these guys can no longer manipulate us on the level that they're doing.
Man, can I just interject there? Because that reminded me of what a Tsarion thing, whenever he said, you know, how have we attracted these people to us? And, you know, if there's maggots, it's dead meat. If it's rats, it's a sewer. You know, it's like, yeah. And it's like, everybody wants to externalize and say, look what is being done to me, but they don't want to look in the mirror and say, okay, what am I doing on an individual level to help, you know, perpetuate this?
Absolutely.
I would say, and that's where it comes back to personal responsibility. We can sit there, we can blame others, but at the end of the day, look in the mirror. What role am I playing in this dynamic, in this master-slave dynamic, and what am I going to do about it to shift it and get out of it?
And this is triggering for a lot of people. But what if it turns out that they have every single right to do what it is that they're doing? You know, we can all make our own choices. We can all.
Meaning, are you talking about like the people on top?
Yeah, the controllers. What like I don't like. Well, what if on some level they have the right to make their own decisions and do what they're doing and do whatever they're doing? This to me, this is the way that we need to think about it if we're going to take personal freedom and personal responsibility for ourselves.
I would sort of both agree and then also challenge maybe the wording of that. I wouldn't say that they have the right to do it. They have the ability to do it. So it's like, it's kind of like the idea of, it's like when we say we have the right to do something, it's like, well, the action is either a wrong action or a right action, and a right action is something that doesn't result in the direct harm of another being, right? So it's like they definitely have the ability, because I think that it kind of goes back to what you said about there wouldn't be a predator if there wasn't prey, right?
Yes.
So it's like, so we're sort of, I think that the average population is more responsible for creating this dynamic of treachery, because it's not even really that the people on top are doing it. They're really not. They're giving us the idea, and then people say, oh, well, hey, there's an idea. They use the symbols, they use kind of like the program, they put it in, and then people are like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And so it's like, so like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I agree with you. And I just think it's more so like, yeah, they have the ability. And then we have the, and I say we, in general of humanity are enacting it. And then, so it's like, now because it's a society based around illusion and delusional external belief in authority, that it creates this chaos because it isn't right. It's just it's not true. It's not correct. It's not right. It's completely delusional. So I think, if that makes sense, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, it does, man. I'll take your correction on the wording. I agree.
Yeah. And I love that you just did that too, because it's like we just here having conversation, all of us, man. We're keeping it real. We're dialoguing. It's not like, oh, hey, like, I can't say, fuck it. Who cares? We just speak what's on our mind. And if Cole says something that you don't agree with, or if I say something, then come right out and say, yo, that's some whack shit, man. Like, this is what I think.
Yeah, I don't mean any disrespect, man. It's just,
no, dude, it's not there's no disrespect at all, dude. Like, this is, I mean, this is how Joel and I have conversations. Like, he'll say something, I'll say something, and it's like, we agree, we don't agree. Like,
I've already got the first verse to my diss track written for Remy.
There it is right there.
Yeah. Like, like, again, we talk about herd mentality. Like, this isn't like we're 4 people right now. We don't need to be any herd mentality and be like, oh, we're on a podcast. Like, let's all just get along. Like, who cares? Like, I'm a man. I'm an adult. Like I don't need to be like coddled, Like,
I'm grateful. My friends were like that. Like, my closest friends, like, because I was in like a rap group, and it was no shots were held back. Like, it was yelling like, no, you're wrong, you don't make any sense, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm really grateful that that's the kind of dynamic that me and my friends had, and they're still to this day like my pretty much, they're still my closest friends, not in proximity but in familial relation. But it was very much so like that. It was like, no, you're wrong to this day. Well, I'll call him like, I think this, nah, you sound like, no, that's crazy, so that's definitely like a missing piece in, I think, in another sort of, I think, representation of the loss of that a willingness to be forward and be, like, respectfully aggressive when necessary.
It's a masculine quality, okay? Because everyone's so worried in this culture, like, I'm gonna hurt someone's feelings, I gotta walk on eggshells, I'm gonna be canceled, like, and it's just like, I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, man, so it's like we talk shit all the time, and so I don't know, I've been valuing it more and more as I've like evolved. It's just keeping it real and to be able to have a dialogue with someone who doesn't agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Bruce Lee called it, I think, temerity, right? And it's the ability to say to the world, no, you're wrong, I'm right. You know what I mean? And actually have that courage and that tenacity of having your own viewpoint and having your own stance and not being so easily crumbled, by the ideas of someone else. I think that's really necessary in the discovery of truth, and in this process is to take conviction in what you're saying. And if down the track you turn out to be wrong and you've got to eat some humble pie, then do so. You know what I mean? But you can't know what you know and believe what you believe if you're gonna question it to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes at you. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's important that, like, for people like us, I think it's important that, and other people that know what's going on, I think it's important that we are polarized in almost an extreme, and because we know what's going on. And so, just being wishy-washy and not firm in your, what you're saying, I think isn't going to do a lot, or be very impactful as far as getting truth out there and getting, the message out for people.
Definitely.
And the truth-seeking journey, it's not this like linear process. It's like, I read an article, I now know the truth. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you go down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh shit, like that doesn't really fully resonate. Oh, but that person says, oh, you know what I mean? Like, that's part of it. And you have to be willing to get in the ring. Like, this is what's part of the journey. It's part of the battle. It's like grappling with ideas. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that because either they haven't built the inner strength, they haven't done the inner work, they don't feel secure in themselves, or they don't want to, they weren't educated that way, they weren't conditioned that way, they've been indoctrinated by culture to just go along, their family, all the reasons, they don't have the time, whatever the case may be. But for whoever has chosen to go on this path, like, cool, kudos. I'll give you like a high five, because it's it's work.
And also it's purely individualistic, right? Because if it's shared with another, it's not really the truth in any kind of significant way, in my view. If we're looking for it to be affirmed by someone else, and what I'm seeing often now a little bit in this I guess quote unquote truth community is that there are little pockets of groupthink that still pop up, where everyone has to be on the same page about every single issue, be it germ theory, be it flat earth, be it whatever it is, and if it's not shared, then all of a sudden there's this dissonance created. But this is why I'm a firm believer in individualism as the path to us actually moving anywhere from this. If either of you got anything to say on that, go for it.
I absolutely agree on that. That's like it's like a cyclical purification process, right? Like it's not linear. So yeah, so this really has to, when you understand that, you have to take into consideration that you do have to look back in. You look out, you look in, you look out, you look in. You put you put the information that you've taken in, you process it, and you put it out, and you try it again. So that's like the trivium method. So it's like the input, then you process it and you put it out, and then you do it again. It's like I've had to multiple times, many times over my lifetime, had to, say, oh, well, that part was wrong, but what about this? Does this hold weight? And then you run it through the fire again.
That's right. And as a student of symbology, it's like the lemniscate, right?
Yeah.
As seen on the magician's head right here. Some people refer it to as the infinity symbol, but it's that going out, extending yourself, then coming back in and assessing actually whether that was true, right? Then heading back out. And that's simply all that is. And on the most essential level, that's our nature in general, right?
That is, yeah. And that's crazy because you show me that symbol right there. That's very similar to like the toroidal hyperboloidal interplay. So on the most fundamental level, that is the foundation of the physical manifest reality, is the toroid hyperboloid, and it's that process of compression and expansion repeatedly. It's a constant flux between the center point, which is the fulcrum, the center point, and then a bounce back between the two sides. And as far as that being, so that something I wanted to sort of go back and touch on is that you said that really the only solution is that individual solution, and the individual. I like to, and I've brought this up before on other in other like talks that I've had with people. Individual meaning not divided, in meaning not, like the inability, right? So in prefix not, and then dividere, to divide, to split up, right? So an individual is truly not split up. They're not separated from themselves, and as a result of not being separated from yourself, you also understand how your actions are fully integrated with the rest of the manifest realm, whether humans and animals and plants and everything. And so if you're unable and you're constantly externalizing things and saying we need to do this, we need to do this, and then you're really not going to get anywhere, because you're constantly, what that is sort of like, that's kind of trying to fix the problem with retrospection. Like when you say we're doing this, you're sort of looking at what we have done and trying to fix it. When you say, all right, well, I as an individual need to look at, what do I believe? How are the things that I believe congruent or incongruent with what is manifest right now? Do I believe that this type of system is legitimate, and what is that system based off of? And then you kind of narrow it down to its fundamental claim, and you kind of base it down to that, and you say, all right, well, am I acting in accordance with that? And first of all, does that have any legitimacy? And have I been acting in accordance with the claim? And if the claim is not true, then I've been acting in a way that's untrue. And you really can't do that for anybody else. You have to do that for yourself. You have to be your own leader. That's why it's like you have the internal monarch and the external anarch. That it's the I rule me, but I rule no one else. And that's until people understand that we've been living largely in an inverted version of that, where we have internal anarchy, we have no ruler within, so therefore we try to rule everybody out here, whether it be oligarchy, monarchy, whatever. So I think that the arche, the ruler, being internal is really important, and really the only solution. I agree with that statement.
Absolutely, man. I mean, this segues us perfectly into what I want to get into in the second half of this episode for the member side. I want to get into the etymology, the natural law side, and also how through understanding this stuff we can take our power back. So to our public audience, we're gonna let you go here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'd love to see you on the other side and to join our community on Patreon. If not, Remy Vega here and Chad Kilgore. Go check both these guys out on Instagram, and they're both sharing some pretty crucial stuff at this point in time. To our members, we'll see you on the other side. Thanks, guys. All right, to our members, welcome back to this incredible dialogue on Here for the Truth, episode 28 with Chad and Remy. Remy, we left off with you kind of segueing us into natural law and the mechanisms of a man owning himself and being himself. Can you give us a little basic introduction and definition? Basically, first, what is natural law to you? How do you perceive that?
Yeah. So I see. I'd really try. I see it as a very simple fundamental. So natural law is just basically the inherent cause and effect, the static inherent cause and effect dynamic of the created universe, and that which underlies the created universe. So when I'm saying natural law, I'm not really referring to anything other than the fundamental. I wouldn't even say objective, because necessarily like there's objective and subjective, but maybe transcendent fabric that holds this all together. And so natural law, in regards to the way how I brought up earlier with like magnetism, right? Or I brought up the toroid and the hyperboloid, which is represented through the dielectric field, and the dielectric field being magnetism, which is the void. I don't want to get too technical on that, but basically, so that's it, right? So there's like a simple law that sort of dictates that when the unpotentiated ether manifests into dielectricity and then terminates, then it creates magnetism, and then there's a constant interplay between that. Or when we see, or in thermodynamics, you have the entropy and the syntropy, you have the diffusion or the recollection of heat, right? So it's the fundamental dynamics that dictate every aspect of reality. Now, I think the part of it that is crucial to the understanding of human societies is the aspect of how that plays into human dynamics and human behavior. So when applied to, heat, we see a certain immutable nature of law, which just means underlying, right? Law means to lie. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European root legh, leg, which means to lie beneath. It's the fundamental. So in human society, the immutable and inherent cause and effect nature of human behaviors. So a certain act in human behavior and a certain belief will have every action will have an inherent effect. And so, in other words, it's what we would understand as morality. And morality also coming from the word, it's MEDH, which means to measure. So morals are a proper measure, which is why we call it a value, right? So it's you evaluating how your actions have an inherent effect within reality. So natural law is simply, in my breakdown and how I've understood it, holistically, it's the fundamental principle dynamics of existence and how they relate to human behavior, if that clarifies it.
I'm glad you gave us the simple version at the end there.
I was going to interject with the layman's version.
Yeah, exactly. So Chad, like, anything you want to add to that too? I'm like, listen to the beginning of that. I'm like, toroidal, like all these words, and I'm just like, I'm gonna have to research this a little bit more. Or what's the layperson's version? So
the layperson's version is that they are spiritual laws that govern the consequences of human behavior. Like it's the cause to every effect that you see. You know what I mean? So every behavior that you enact in the world, you're going to get, it's the deterministic aspect of free will,
Yeah.
So every behavior, you're going to get a reaction back, and natural law is what kicks you back that reaction. So
how has understanding natural law for you, Chad, changed the way you interact in your life and your understanding of being here in this reality?
It gives you like a foundation of morality, that like any action you take that harms another sentient being is not a right, it's a wrong. It's like it breaks down very easily, how you should behave in our world. You know what I mean? And I think that if people knew that this was a real thing, like it's a spiritual thing, or it's a thing that you're going to get a response for every action you take, regardless of if you can see the correlation to it, they may be behaving a little differently, because you can't just hide from natural law. Like you can't just, well, nobody sees me doing this. Like
there's consequences for everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, this is one thing that, I discovered, I guess, in my own way, just through my own shadow work journey, without really diving deep into the natural law side of things. It's just we believe for the longest time growing up that we can be as reckless as we want to be, and there's never going to be anything to pay for that. But the more that we don't, I guess, adhere to natural law, then would you say to an extent that correlates to how deep our shadow work and our underworld journey and our underworld cycle is later on, you know what I mean? Until we're willing to bring in the checks and balances and reconcile what we've created.
Yeah. And Passio puts it perfectly. He calls it the law of freedom. As morality increases, freedom increases, and as morality decreases, freedom decreases. It's just we get out exactly what we put into it. And exactly like you were saying, like people that avoid doing their shadow work are going to start manifesting things that are not going to be in alignment, probably with truth and good behavior and stuff on some level. So
Nice.
Yeah, and I think that like that plays into like the collective experience as much as it does the individual experience, because I think that when you're living really in dissonance with that, like you feel it, because everyone's in variance of it. Everybody wavers, everyone wavers. We're all the wave. We're the part that varies. And the more that you align with it, the better. But you feel it when you're not really acting like in a way that's really harmonious with the way things actually are, and our job is to align our perspectives with it. It's not really to to dictate it, but to that's like the aspect of, that's the part of existence that requires the humility, So I think you feel it, because I think that's, Joel, was kind of what you were saying, like you really, that you have to do that shadow work. The more that you ignore it, the more that deep, heavy darkness kind of builds up in you. And then if you keep ignoring it, then everyone else is going to get that spillover too, So it's kind of this feedback with you and everyone else,
Yeah, and you're also going to, I guess, on some level, create a reality around you that allows that shadow to continue to exist, and it continues to give you the opportunity to avoid doing that work, because naturally that's what you're going to create, because you're not willing to go there. You know what I mean? So the people around you, the environments around you, your work life, your relationships, all of it is going to be dictated by the fact that, holy shit, I haven't looked at the bag of demons that are built in the corner over here.
Yeah, that's a really cool observation. I've never really thought about it in that specific way, but that's astute observation, good sir.
Oh man, I'm glad I got my credit back with you.
Oh man. Hey man, Remy, remember that one time you got invited on the podcast and you like
What are you
told
told
the
him
host that he was wrong?
Remember you said he was wrong?
Yeah.
You're wrong.
That's so
You gave him
like
the
me,
Trump
man.
wrong.
Wrong.
Oh man. All right, I'm out.
But literally, man, this is the reality of it, right? And because this was my personal experience. And also, when we're willing to go through this journey and reconcile this is where intuition comes into the picture, because that still voice, it's completely numbed and it's completely blocked out. We can't even hear it. We can barely hear it at all while we're carrying that bag. You know what I mean? But the moment we start paying attention and we do that one little thing to start clawing our way back into morality and clawing our way back into the center of the lemniscate, then it becomes louder, right? And really, now that I'm thinking about or feeling into this, that voice can be tied in perfectly to us just listening to natural law and listening to that inherent morality. We always know what the right thing to do is. Okay.
Yeah.
Always but it's hard to acknowledge what's right when we have to face the consequences that it bears on the pseudo self that we've created as a result of our ignorance.
Wow. Well said. Yeah, definitely. Chad, jump in. I don't want to hog. I don't want to be the mic hog.
Hey,
No,
man.
you're good, man.
We're here, bro. If you've got something to say, bro, go for it, man. Let's chat. Yerasimos, where you at? Come on, man.
Man, I'm enjoying this right now. I could talk a lot other times, but right now I'm just enjoying what's going on. I guess what I will add to this, and we've talked about this before in other podcasts, is that when we talk about that whisper, that intuition, and it's different for everyone. I'm a student of human design, so I think each person has their own specific, way to tap into their intuition, their own unique way of like making decisions. And so I think that the more you take care of yourself, the more you work on, like we keep talking about this inner work, this shadow work, the more we nourish our bodies and our minds and our souls the right way, like it's like the right thing to do is so much closer to us than far away. Like we're like, oh man, I don't even know, I'm lost, I gotta dig through everything, like someone tell me. And then it's like, then you stop relying on you, like you stop taking the reins of your own life and having that individualistic nature, and you're like, well, someone else tell me what to do. I can't hear the voice within, so maybe an external voice will come to me and tell me what to do,
right?
And it's like, it's like, again, it's like taking control of your life and being as healthy as you can on all levels. Health is not just, well, I ate this food today and I went for a run. There's so many things, like, what are you consuming? How are you spending your time? What kind of relationships are you in, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the more that Remy, you mentioned holistic, that word, like the more you're approaching your health in a holistic manner and getting real with yourself, that the right thing to do, the right way to act, the right way to be is just, it's just there. You just you just know it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's like we've been programmed and conditioned to just ignore that intuitive aspect You know, this one lady messaged me and was like, my doctor told me, don't trust your instincts, trust the science. You know, and like, what, I mean, what words could he have uttered that would have been more harmful to her? You know what I mean? They just want to program, you know, externalize everything, externalize your life. It might as well be the motto for the past few years, you know,
Past few
because I
millennia,
just
man.
Are
yeah.
are either one of you, are you familiar with human design at all, or is that just completely, you don't know what it is?
I've never heard the
Not
term
really.
before.
I listened to a podcast of you talking about it, but that's it.
Okay, well, real quickly, I'm just going to bring it up. Human design is like, there's so many tools out there that allow you and support you in really tuning into what your unique nature is. You know, there are a lot of esoteric sciences out there. Human design is one that integrates other four esoteric sciences to modern sciences. Anyways, it operates under like knowing your time of birth, date of birth, etc. Anyways, the reason I want to bring that up is because we asked for your birth information, you guys, and Joel actually pulled up your charts. And I won't go too into it. We could talk about that offline, but just from a intuition standpoint, which is there's something in human design called your inner authority, which is your decision-making process. So Joel, myself, and Remy, we're both emotional authorities.
All
And
three.
so that means that, right? Yeah, we're solar plexus emotional authorities, which means that we're always existing on some sort of emotional wave. And so it's really important for us to allow ourselves to go through these waves before making decisions. So if we're at the height of the wave or the low of the wave, we shouldn't make a decision. We got to give ourselves time before we come to some sort of internal place of clarity around that. Okay?
Yeah.
Now for you, you're a splenic projector. So I mean, the spleen is that part of us that connects to like that fight or flight, that instinct, the quickest thing. So what I would say to you, Chad, is when you have that feeling of like a fuck no, it's almost like an animal, like you're feeling into that, like this is dangerous, this isn't right for me. You have to honor that. You have to go for that, because if you allow things to get into the mind and you start playing this like, you know, well, let me just start analyzing the pros and the cons. Like for you, that's not the right way to go. Like you have to honor that initial thing, that instinct. So what you just brought up, that story about this person, this doctor saying like, ignore your instincts, trust the science. Like, I think that's like off in general, but especially to like a splenic type, it's like, no, that's
Right.
going completely against your nature. So I'm curious, based on what I just said for both of you, how is that like played out at all in your life?
So are you saying like
Sorry, I don't know if
this
I
is
got all
very
too,
new to me,
Let
bro.
me
So-
simplify this a little bit. So,
Yeah.
Chad, the way that you should make decisions, you need to honor your instantaneous thing that comes up. Whatever instantly
Gut
comes to you
reaction.
is the right
Yeah.
thing for you. Whereas for Remy, as an emotional, you need to make sure that you're not making decisions from the high point or the low point. If you wait 24 to 48 hours and you still feel the same way about something, then it's generally the right thing for you. Whereas if you make decisions from the top of the wave or the bottom of the wave, then you're going to often end up creating a cycle for you, which might not be particularly useful.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I definitely have that kind of characteristic to my decision making. Like I don't make very impulsive decisions.
Yeah.
One impulsive decision I made was like, I'm gonna move to Pennsylvania, and I like just moved out here like on a super quick notice. But it was that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I think that does play into it. That's pretty interesting. I have to look into this a little bit more. I'm sort of thinking of the wave component that you're explaining. I want to understand that a little bit more, because it's like I do study field theory, electro or like acoustics, audio engineering and stuff like that. All uses like sound wave stuff, and the wave nature of existence kind of
Listen,
intrigues me.
it's another thing that's cool, that's out there, that supports people
Yeah.
on their journey. Like some people don't need any of this shit, you know, and it's a cool thing to explore. So anyways, I just wanted to bring it up because we were talking about that nature. Anyways,
Where I was going to go before this little segue was, you know how I was talking about the concept of like the ignored shadow, or the suppressed or the repressed shadow. Well, this is when savior programs come into play, right? And we're more likely to be looking for some kind of external hope or external savior when we're not when we're not willing to look at our own shit. And for mainstream culture, these saviors rock up as, you mean, doctors and scientists and the vaccine and whatever it might be. But like in the truth community, it shows up as, you mean, 5D or Galactic Federation, or
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean, some I'm
Q.
Starseed light worker. We're going through some kind of big galactic shift that's gonna, you know what I mean, save us all. But all that is rooted in the fact that you're not willing to look at your own shit.
Yeah.
Man, I totally agree. I totally agree. Like I was saying, is like, everybody wants to externalize rather than looking at themselves. And yeah, even within the truth community, though, it's like people go a quarter of the way up, the mountain of truth and say, I will go no further because, it's too dangerous, it's too scary or whatever. And, we'll send somebody else up to go for us, whether it's, religion or, psychological operations like Q or something, Trump savior. I mean, yeah, it's people don't want to realize that they have the power within themselves, I think, and that's scary as shit to most people. And as soon as, and to me, like, as soon as you come to that realization, it's very empowering.
Absolutely, man, because you do take the power back and you realize you're in control. And really all it is, that next rung in the ladder is difficult to take, because all of a sudden it's equivalent to somewhere that you're not willing to go within yourself. You're only willing to go as far, right? But you're not willing to meet that part, because that's what's necessary for you to keep on this path of truth, And I mean, I say this every episode, but the great Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. This holds the keys to what we're discussing in terms of natural law, in terms of the lemniscate, which is that infinity symbol that I showed you before, right? The ancients knew this. It's always been there. It's so inherent to us.
And again, it's like, if you don't take personal responsibility, if you don't go fully up there, then you can always blame someone else, as opposed to like, hey, I'm responsible for the amazing things that happen in my life, and I'm also responsible in the things that didn't feel as amazing, even though in my opinion I go, well, no, that just can bring you closer towards living a life of truth. Is like, oh, this didn't work out well, this relationship didn't work, but are you going to sit there in victim mode? I mean, you can have a few moments, it's okay. It's not about like, no one's a victim. You're allowed to feel feelings and be like, this sucks, what the fuck. But then where do you ultimately end up living in? Where do you go from there? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, there's always opportunities for growth, opportunities for learning, and all the fucked up shit that happens. It's just whether or not you come from an ideology of like, I'm responsible, like I'm creating my own life, and not in this like woo woo, like the secret new age way.
Imagination,
culture,
right? Yeah. Sorry, go.
Yeah. I was going to say, and culture gives you every opportunity to offload that responsibility, whether it's just simply watching TV for 8 hours a day and not thinking about it and piling it in the corner of shadow work to do later, or, they give you the political leaders, they give you all these people, celebrities, they give you every opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to give that to them, and like we were saying, man, it's all just look in the mirror.
Yeah,
it's all you.
When I moved to Los Angeles over 8 years ago, I was living in New York City for about 8 years, and like, I went through some dark nights of the soul. I got into relationships that I probably wouldn't have gotten into in LA, because they were bringing me closer to realizing certain things about myself. They fucking sucked, man. I had some endings that just sucked, and like, I had to be in it. I had to experience it, and I wasn't sitting there blaming things. I allowed to take this pain and go, okay, well, what can I learn about myself from this pain? What have I been ignoring? What have I been relying on? What stories have I been telling myself? Oh shit, what went on in my youth? What up? You know what I'm saying? It was like, I took this and allowed it to go inwards to go, oh man, like, wow, I was really like feeling lonely, and I was uncomfortable, and I was seeking connection externally, and I wasn't really on my path of truth and art and creativity and healing, and so I allowed myself to get into these places that didn't support me. Now, ultimately, it guided me closer. I needed to have this experience. My soul needed to have these experiences in order to evolve and step up to the next level. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's like, are individuals willing to do that kind of introspection, that inner work, where certain things happen in their life and they go, instead of pointing the finger, and be like, well, fuck that bitch, you know, she was mean and she left me and she blah, 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 whatever. Or it's like, well, what role did I play in that? You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's like, again, it's so corny, you know, you hear it all the time. It's like this, like we point one finger out there and then, oh, there's 3 ones pointing back at us. But it's so true though, you know, like, you know, you did this thing and it's like, no, just be real with yourself. Like, oh, like I you know what I'm saying? So I'm curious, like in your lives during your rites of passages, like, you know, where did that come up for you? You know, where it's like, it's easier. You wanted to maybe blame someone, but you had to be real with yourself and look in the mirror and go, okay, what role am I playing in this experience and how things are playing out for me?
Shoot.
Remy, you're me.
Yeah. You win.
Go, Remy.
Well,
Pick ahead. All right. So
okay.
I think, I mean, for me personally, it was a lot of interpersonal relationships where it was just like, all right, I have a, you know, not a great, you know, I spoke earlier about, you know, some good lessons that I learned from my mom, but there's not really a great relationship there. And that's something that I sort of kept on allowing to happen in the relationships that I would start and, you know, let go on longer than needed to. So I was allowing myself basically to get trampled upon, but I was always like, oh, I just can't find a nice lady, you know? And like, but it's like, no, I was really like kind of encouraging it to a certain extent. I was just letting myself get stepped on. And it was something that I had to look at myself. And it was, you know, about 5-6 years ago. And I was just like, all right, well, I can't keep on getting in these stupid relationships that I know at the beginning, but then I say, shut up, go back there into the subconscious again. And I'm gonna try to make it work. I knew. And so it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's a relationship thing there. How does that play into it? Well, if you never learn how to look at even just a simple romantic relationship that you're in and recognize, well, I've done something to kind of encourage this behavior and to perpetuate it, and then in fact run for it and run to it and say, come back, you know, if you can't even go that far, well, shit, how you think you're gonna like present some type of plan to save the world? You know, like that's absurd. And I think somebody brought this up, and it was in reference to like Karl Marx. You know, it's like Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and he's like, don't worry, guys, I got this big ass idea. I'm gonna write this book about it, and everybody's gonna be all good, and I got the whole plan. And then it's like you go look at his family history, and it's like he was like abusive, he was an alcoholic, his kids hated him, and it's like this is a perfect example of that. You know, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to worry about that over there. All that's over here. And you never do anything. You never do anything internally. And you like, you know, you're ignoring your intuition. And I think something that, I think Joel said it earlier, is that, no, you know what? It wasn't, it was Yerasimos. I'm saying that right?
Yerasimos. Yeah.
Yerasimos. Yeah. That's a cool name. Anyway, you said something along the lines of like, you stop hearing that voice inside, and then you hope someone else says it, and you hope someone else says it for you. And it's like, they're either not going to say it, or if they say it and you don't recognize it as being actually, you know, in harmony with what is actually being said to you within, if you don't recognize, oh wait, it's at the end of the day, I still do have to hear that from within, and it still has to be acted upon from within. It's like, so that's happened with me in relationships. That's happened with me in my religious journey, you know, going from this religion to that religion, and I always wanted the religion. I was like, oh, I'm Christian. No, Christianity came from Judaism. And then I was like, well, if neither of those, well, maybe Islam or Sufism. And I've learned a lot from these things. And I learned it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to throw the whole thing out. It's like, I learned a whole bunch of different lessons from them. And a lot of them stuck through with me. But, I was just doing that whole, oh, well, this system is going to be the thing that saves me, and this system is going to be the thing that saves me. And then it, you know, turns out that it wasn't that. And it's not even just like, I'm going to save me. And it's like, me, Remy, this guy. It's like, no, it's really like the thing that is the signal that creates the person that is me, that transcends this, and actually everybody is connected to. That's actually the thing that you have to go inside to find. And then you find that it's really outside the realms of time and space in general, but that's where like kind of in and, you know, the as within, so without. And I've had to recognize that in so many different levels, and I'm still having to. I mean, there's still belief systems and understandings of things that I'm elementary at and getting deeper into, and then I have to say, well, I was wrong about that. And if I keep on thinking, oh, I was right about that, then where am I going to go? Where am I going to go next? So that's been, every day.
Yeah, man. Hear that, bro? And
God, man, what do you have to say in terms of your own journey? And you can speak about whatever you want, but I'm even curious, even just like that transition, because you were playing football, you were auditioning for some teams, whatever, like how did that process go for you, where you were just like, this thing that I've been doing my whole life, this thing where probably people were projecting onto me like, oh, you're gonna
Yeah.
be X, Y, and Z, and then it's like, no, I'm not that, I'm this.
Yeah, man, that was my identity, for 20 some years. If my name and football just went hand in hand. And so, whenever that died, it was like, okay, well, what the hell am I going to do now? Now I'm going to have to do some soul searching and see, why I'm really here and things like that. And so, yeah, it was that transition time from basically, peddling used furniture, from being a professional athlete to now being an artist was involved a lot of soul searching and figuring out who I am. And I think I feel more myself now than I ever did whenever I was playing football. I enjoyed it, but at some level I still feel like I was, doing it because that's what I was supposed to do in the eyes of other people. But man, as far as I wanted to touch on this, so before I left college, me and some friends got together and we decided we're going to do a mushroom trip, and that'll force you to look at some shit. You know what I mean? Like, talk about bringing the shadow work up. That makes you look at my college life like, wow, I went through 4 years of being an asshole. You know what I mean? But that kind of blew the doors off of like reality for me. And like, I was like, man, we are, that was like the time I realized that we're not living right. So
yeah, bro. There's
I can't say I got the message fully. Like, I wish I could say I did that and then like everything was perfect after that. But no, it's definitely not linear, man. It was yeah.
Ongoing process, bro.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and it's like you have those moments for whatever reason, like for some people, like psychedelics have played a huge role in that, just like where there's that crack and then something comes through and it's like, aha, so this is how I've been. This is how I've been living my life. This is the impact I've been having on the people around me, So you have that shift in awareness, but then what do you do about it? Because awareness is awareness. There's no action in it. But what are you going to do then with that new level of awareness? How are you going to make the changes in your life? How are you going to move forward differently? So it's really cool, man. I mean, that's, man, radical self-honesty, dude, and humility, and in feeling the pain of the realization of those things. That's key too. It's not just a cerebral process. Well, my mom did this and my dad did that, and then that's why I did this. And it's like, no, like, fuck, man, I was a fucking dick to my ex-girlfriend, man. Like, I did some fucked up shit, and then to like feel that. And then how does that then shift you on this entire level, like all the cells in your body that like cause you to then, alter your behavior in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, that's the true embodied work.
Exactly.
That's the shadow work. It's not just up here above the head. It has to be the somatic whole thing.
And that's unity consciousness, when your thoughts, emotions, and your actions are all synced up together. So many people think and feel one way, but they don't act in the way they're thinking and feeling, and so they're not synced up.
Yeah, or they're aware of why they do the things they do, or why certain things happen in their life, but then the same thing continues to happen. And it's like, well, how are you going to change things up?
So like there's no change in action under those cases. It's like, so it's like understanding and you feel it, but you don't really ever change how you act. That's really interesting. I was just kind of taking in what you said. you know, because I don't want this whole thing. It's like, all right, I started talking about this stuff suddenly in like 2020, and I started saying, hey, you know, I think it's about time that I share what I know and what I've learned. But at the same time, it's like I'm still, you know, I don't even. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I still have to. I'm sure still learning how to process my emotions a lot. I'm a bottler, you know what I mean? So it's like I can't get out here. And you said it's not all just a cerebral thing. And I'm like, for me, a lot of times it is a very, very cerebral thing, primarily a cerebral thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, lesson to me from this conversation is sometimes, you know, you gotta let the feelings come up too, you know, because I'm a very head, I think, and I feel it. I make sure that it lines up. I make sure that I apply my compass, you know, the compassion, the is this going to be something that can hurt somebody? But I don't let myself feel it enough. And I think that that's kind of like a lesson of, well, hey, you just asked, like, hey, where's one of those moments where you pointed the finger and you're right now? I just like kind of came to that realization. I'm like, oh, well, you know what? Honestly, like sometimes I don't like let myself feel it enough. Like I don't let myself, you know, and
Cool.
that can kind of disconnect you from communication with people sometimes too, I think.
Yeah,
And
man.
this is
I mean, I'm
yeah.
a body worker by trade. That's one of the things that I do, and I'm all about like somatic awakening somatic intelligence and really tapping into the subconscious through the physical body and doing really deep physical work, so these repressed emotions and things can come up to the surface. So for me, that was game changing. That changed things up for me. So yeah, man, come out to fucking California, bro. You know, just do some deep work.
Yeah, man. I do want to get back to the home state again. I'm like honestly a little bit like I'm freaked out about traveling a little bit, you know. And I'm like, I know
I
I'm
hear
like
you.
cannot live in a state of fear, but it's like, all right, it kind of freaks me out to travel. It makes me think like, what if, you know what I mean? Like, what if because that was a whole big reason why I moved from California.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
because it was like I was like, oh, it was during the whole Ebola scare, and I was like, yo, this is the pandemic that they're gonna use to shut the world down. I was like, this is it. And if it's not this one, it's going to be the next one. So I like skirted and I moved to Pennsylvania, and then I'm like kind of been sitting. So sometimes that like hyper like analytical, like I can sense things for a long time, I think before, and this isn't, I'm not, you know, saying this to be arrogant, like, but like I can sense things and I
Sure,
can kind of
bro.
put the pieces together before it even happens. And then sometimes I'm like, it will stun me, you know, like, so, but yeah, I
You don't sound
definitely,
arrogant, man. You can celebrate your wins and claim the things that have worked for you. Man, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. No, there's a big trend in, I think when you become a person who says I'm going to share information, where I get a lot of messages of people thinking, being like, you think you know everything, man. I'm like, I really don't.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
listen. The thing about this call that we've answered as truth seekers is that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't have a fucking clue. Like, I'm just like, man, there's this whole world out there, and it's like, and you have to remember the masses, they're not even they have no clue at all. So it's just like, we have in our own worlds, we have little nuggets to share, and for a lot of people, man, that could be life changing. So it's like we don't. This is the other thing that keeps us back, and it did for me. I was like, well, if I don't know everything, I can't share anything.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, I can share what I can share. And if there's 20 people that are into it or 50 people that are into it, you know what I mean? It's just
well, we
like, and
can.
that
Yeah.
that was the big changing factor for me.
The one thing that we can always share truthfully and with fortitude is our experience, because that's uniquely your own, and the lessons that you've learned from your experience is ultimately what you have to offer to anyone else, and that's where your area of service is. It's what you've overcome yourself, you know. And so when people say I've got nothing to share, that's bullshit. It's not about sharing data and facts and you mean whatever kind of intelligence there is. It's about sharing your own unique intelligence, your own unique um, uh, offerings based on what you've gleaned within yourself. So yeah, man, I hear you there. And like as Yerasimos stated, in terms of the body, that was a big part for me was feeling right, because it's body, mind, psyche, and we're so conditioned and programmed to believe that the psyche is just in the head and that consciousness just exists in the head when it simply doesn't, you know. And by developing somatic practices, we can actually orient ourselves in reality. We become more grounded, we become more centered, we become more discerning. So a big part of my process, and I think Erasmus for this definitely, was just tuning into my body and being like, what is it that you actually want to feel right now? What is it that needs to be felt? What have I been repressing? What needs to be expressed? And that was been a massive alleviation for my journey and for my path of actually doing shadow work and discerning more clearer who I am and what it is that I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
There's something that that Yerasimos said. He said like once you start learning, then you realize, oh wait, there's a whole bunch of shit I don't know. I don't know anything like this. And there's something recently that I was it's something that I had been familiar with, a form of reasoning that I have been introduced to through Mark Passio stuff. But there's another person who actually addresses it. It's the concept of apophysis. It's knowing what something is by knowing what it's not. And another term for it is like the Pali term neti, which means not this, not that, right? So it's like, I think that to be able to fundamentally make any movement or any progress in life, you have to recognize that there is a truth, that there is a grand truth, that there is a fundamental and a principle to existence. And then the growth comes when you can look and say, oh, well, it's not that. Oh, well, it's not that. And not just in not just in a critical, denigrating way, but in like a way of saying, oh, well, oh, it's not quite that. It's not quite that. And then that's kind of like that paradox, and paradox and contradiction are not the same thing, right? Paradox, it means like beyond belief, right? So it's like, well, it's beyond what I believed, this moment or whatever, but it's like you come to a new recognition, and you don't just like shed everything and you're nothing that you were before. It's just like, oh, well, oh, it's not that part. It's not that part. And it's not that part. And I think that that's kind of like that's it. That was a thought that popped up. You're saying all that stuff and what Joel was saying
Definitely,
too.
man. That's the process of discovery, bro. That's what it is. You mean it's just coming at it from the other side, and the only way to know what it's not is by actually going and looking and going and touching and going and finding out and going and seeing, right? How else can you begin to carve Michelangelo out of that block, right? You can't otherwise.
Yeah, and then like we come to the realization, oh God, whenever we start looking into this stuff, like, oh God, we don't know shit, like there's so much to know out there. What kind of value can I possibly offer somebody else? But then, we're making the steps to learn this stuff, as everyone should that's on the path. But when it comes to the average person walking around, the average consciousness walking around, they know infinitely less than you do when you think you don't know shit. I've come to realize that. And whenever you get a troll, on your page or something just spouting nonsense, it's easy. That I used to take that more personal than I do now, but now I know what level of consciousness they're operating at. And Rudolf Steiner said, once people hit age 27, if they don't have a spiritual calling telling them to go forward and know more, then they will stagnate there for the rest of their lives. And I think 27 is probably a little old compared to, or a little mature compared to some of the people we deal with on a daily basis. And because it seems like a lot of them haven't progressed past toddler, but it's it just makes so much more sense when you hear it contextualized like that.
For sure, man. I mean, the herd psychology is based on the fact that that they're still rooted in the child's idea of having safety dictate and be the primary motivator for all their decision making skills. So psychologically, most people haven't developed beyond the toddler and beyond the child stage, and that's what the predator preys upon. It's safety.
That's crazy. That's a crazy. So yeah, so you're saying basically that like the herd mentality is essentially the childlike percent. That's really, that definitely lines up with a lot of stuff that I think that I've researched and thought.
I refer to no, continue.
Oh no, I say that's just I like how Joel says stuff. He connects these things that I'm like, that I wouldn't have said it that way, or people that I've said that, but it's like it's a complete connection with it's like the idea of the proxy parent, right? And Chad, I know Chad is familiar with this concept too, because it's something that Mark Passio speaks about, right? It's like, and a whole bunch of people speak about it. That was my introduction to it, but it's the idea that like you're always looking for like this fake parent to fill in for your protector and then for your nurturer.
Yep.
And like, that's like really what the whole herd mentality is. And that's,
yeah, dude. Daddy
There's a great
government.
article that I refer to a lot of people. I think it's great. We had him on the podcast a few episodes ago, Jason Christoff, and he wrote a great article on like adults and then adults who act like children. And it's like this great list of like 40 or 50 things of like what the adult would do and what the adult child would do. And it's such a great article because, as individuals, we can look at that and read it and gauge like, oh, okay, well, over here, I'm definitely acting like an adult. And like over here, man, I got some work to do, and it's a really cool thing. I'll email it to you guys because I think you both would enjoy it.
Yeah, but absolutely, man. It is the proxy parent that simply fills in the role, so this person doesn't have to psychologically develop the fortitude they need of actually figuring stuff out on their own, because these paths have been pre-carved for us by these dictators. So most of our lives, the trajectory, they're straight lines, they're highways, they're already made before we get there, right? Whereas the authentic path, it's a crooked road. We figure it out with each step. And normally, traditionally, ancestrally, there's these rites of passages which human beings would have to go through to break away from their mother, or to break away from their father, and actually go through something which is life changing for them to begin on their real life journey of being an individual. But now in our malignant culture, those rites of passages, they're easily bypassed. In fact, for most of us, they no longer exist at all. And the lack of these rites of passages is why most people don't develop beyond that phase. And then we have the proxy daddy government and mummy pharmaceutical to be like, here, stay coddled. Here's your blanket. Wear it over your mouth. You're good.
That's why I think we should round up all the 13-year-old boys and just throw them in the middle of the forest. And if they survive, they survive.
Yeah.
Teach you.
That's crazy though,
it.
because those rites of passage, it's like, one thing that I've recognized from studying multiple religions, like intently in different cultures, is that those rites of passage always represented something that was in nature, right? Like it was never just like, oh, here's like this thing that we just kind of made up. And like, it's like, it always has like an archetype that is a natural process. And it's like, and it's really strange because we don't have that like overall, which is like, it's like, okay, well, how are we supposed to understand the natural cycles of things, the laws of nature? How are we supposed to understand this when we're not really integrated into it individually or societally or anything? It's like our society is based off of a complete disconnection from that. And I think that obviously that's intentional because they use the same exact symbols and the same exact cultural, or not cultural, natural cycles, but in like this inverted, disconnected way. That's why they give us the sunlight ritual when we go get gas. They give us the ritual of the cycle of the sunlight when we go to Target and we see the sun symbol. They give us the birth symbol when we go and pick up a pack of cigarettes, or we buy a Chanel purse that has the vesica piscis, the ovum, the oval symbol, and it's like, so it's like we go through these rituals, but instead of doing it consciously and like with an intention and like with an actual like a purpose of harmonizing with them, we go through it so that it's almost just like it's like a little morsel of it, so it keeps us from starving completely, but then they make us hunger for the rest of it. And not to say they, but we also contribute to our
enslavement,
hungering for it. Yeah, are hungering for it by not really, many of us don't really go further than that and recognize the hunger. And that's really wild, man.
Welcome to the upside down, bro. It's crazy to think, hey, that like that's what the overlay of this malignant society is based upon. It's based upon an inversion of pretty much everything that's natural. And for some reason, we're here existing within that to try figure out who the fuck we are in that process. Like it's just a wild thing to put those pieces together and be like, what the fuck is actually going on right now?
Yeah, it's also why they want to jam pack everyone into these like 5G smart cities, like let's stay as far away from nature as you can. Oh, you wanna grow vegetables on your lawn? Well, that's illegal. You can't do that. It's like anything. It's like that. It's about getting closer to nature. It's like we have a problem with it. Like, oh, let's live off the grid. Let's do all this. Nope, can't do that. Unable to do that. Like it's just funny how it's just like you said, it's programmed to keep us disconnected from nature. And so how can we fight that program? Because it's coming at us from every angle. Even us here, like, we use technology as a tool, but sometimes these tools can take us over. And it's like, man, like I got trees and hiking trails outside of where I live. And there's times where I'm like, I must stay on my devices. I must stay connected to the board, and so it's, takes work.
Yeah, dude. And I mean, there's the same reason like we have high rises and people spending their entire lives above ground in 15, 16, 20, 30, 40, 50 floors, right? And I mean, I think going down this timeline, like we see in Brave New World, we're going to begin seeing platformed cities as well. And we're going to be seeing more manifest this actual disconnection from the earth. Because to me, there's no doubt that that's what this is about. It's at the core of whatever the predator is, it's anti-life. That's the way I see it.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest tasks that they're trying to enact is that total disconnect from all things natural, all things that lead you back to creation, I should say. Anything that'll take you back to your source and your power, they want to disconnect. And I think they're trying to do that through pharmacological means, and they're trying to do that through food and, the media you take in, your information. Every level of input into your body, I think, is designed to disconnect you from that spirit.
Definitely, man. And I mean, this is Earth School, bro. This is deep soul evolution from my perspective that we came here for, So it's never going to be unicorns and rainbows. But for the true seeker, this is it's fertile environment for us to do the realest inner work ever, and that's the one place that they're not going to be able to hijack where the truth lives, and that's within each and every single one of us. So if we're not getting that reflection from our society, because most of us don't live immersed in nature, then we've got to primarily look for it within ourselves and then adjust accordingly.
Amen.
Amen to that. Wait, hold up. Woman, I don't want to get canceled.
Exactly. You need to be PC on this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. I reckon that was a beautiful place to end this one, man. I'm so glad to be connected with both you gentlemen, and truly honor the paths that you've both taken and the journey that you guys are on. So yeah, man, just be here now and have this conversation. It's something that I'm grateful to partake in with both of you. So thank you for making the time.
I'm equally grateful, man. Thank you for reaching out, and it's great to connect with both of you guys.
Yeah, same here. I mean, this is one of the cool things about having a platform like this, is just meeting other people that are on the path, that are doing your thing and playing their part, and just connecting with other cool motherfuckers.
Yeah,
absolutely, man. Anything either of you guys want to shout out to our audience? Let them know your Instagram handles, where they can find you. Because honestly, guys, both these guys are posting pretty fire content that is super helpful. So yeah, let them know.
Remy, go for it, dude.
Yeah. So I got Instagram at Remy.Vega, REMY.VEGA. I've made some tunes in my time. They're not, they're pretty old. So I mean, I guess if you want to look it up on Bandcamp.com or RemyVega.bandcamp.com. So but that's not really my main focus right now. My main focus is trying to I plan on making music, but until it contains a little bit more like substantial topics, then, mainly I'm just trying to, connect with people and share research and get feedback. And, so yeah, check me out on Instagram if you want to link. I try to, talk with as many people. I don't have a huge following or nothing. So, if anybody wants to send some messages through and challenge my perspectives and help me grow a little bit, and I can maybe do the same. So, yeah.
Do you make beats, bro?
We're all here for.
I do make beats. Yeah. I play keys. I make beats. That's like that's kind of
awesome, man. But let's connect, bro. I'd love to hear something, and maybe we can collab on something down the road for sure. We're good.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm for it. Yeah.
Chad, it's beautiful, boys. Look what's happening.
Get a little background vocals in there, guys.
Yeah. We'll be on the background vocals.
Awesome.
Chad, let them know where they can find you, man, and also particularly your artwork, bro. It's pretty incredible.
Thank you, man. On Instagram, It is C Kilgore 47. And then I also have an art account that is Chad Kilgore _ and a website. It's just chadkilgore.com.
Awesome.
Cool.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. So our members, we're super grateful for your support. As always, if you dig, tell your friends, share it around. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean.